Those who are sitting outside are kindly requested to join us in the auditorium. There is a minute to go. If you are sitting in the back of the room, we can join because it's a small assembly and you can have your say. If you have any questions, you are invited. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very warm welcome. Before I present the participants of today's debate, we are in a very difficult discussion. Metaverse. The title of the discussion has been discussed at length. However, little do we know what that is going to look like. There are practically no examples of metaverse use. We're in for a difficult task to tell you about it, but I'll be asking the guests. Let me start with online participants, Aleksandra participants, female philosopher and female researcher of new technologies. We've got Michał Boni, former administration and digitization minister, and now Higher School of Psychology in Warsaw, so that you do not present my old times. And on site, Jakub Turowski, Public Policy Director for CE in Meta. My name is Karol Tokarczyk. I'm digital analyst for policies in Polityka Weekly. Let's start with the introduction. Aleksandra, could you explain what Metaverse is? Is this one reality, many realities? Let's start from the metaphysical point of view. The concept is pretty interesting. It's rooted in literature and SF, and to a certain extent in philosophy. It's a potential world of hypotheses where we can develop different activities, and some of these may mimic what we know from our own world, a virtual world. In virtual and potential, something that has not happened, are equal terms in philosophy. The term has been intermediated from science fiction novels, where the world was created in hypotheses. And today we have virtual reality, augmented reality, so the technical capabilities that make it real. It used to be the world of simulations and imagination, senses, something that is not happening in reality but can be simulated. We can participate in the world. Today, we have seen the technology by no means new. Virtual reality we've known since the 80s. There's been ups and downs. It was difficult to incubate, to produce stimulation and simulation. We can say today that some simulating technologies are here. We can perceive it in the world, we can communicate in the world, we can interact with others, we can develop reality in a digital way, which we could inhabit, although I fear to use this word. We could experience different things, which can have its own economy, something that we'll be speaking about. To start with, I have experienced this reality. 10 years ago, I was in the Second Life, which was believed to be a prototype of Metaverse, a simple form on a screen, but the one that materialized, that showed us something, good things and bad things. Philip Linden, the creator of Second Life, was going to create a metaverse. He publicized this concept a few years ago, but technology tycoons were ahead of him and they started to create metaverse. We need this introduction because some of you might be into technologies, but not all of you. So it's worth indicating what metaverse might be. What is the definition of meta? Meta. A few years ago, we used to be Facebook, now it's Meta. It is supposed to reflect our perception of the internet of the future. Let me start by saying that, in my opinion, the metaverse that we speak so much about is the natural evolution of how we can communicate owing to digital solutions, thinking about technological capabilities at hand. It all started in digital communication, in the internet. It all started with written matter. Facebook was a written thing back then. Then technological solutions made it possible to have picture downloading possibility into seeds and video, live video, and all that made it possible to enhance communication between us. It's a natural thing, natural step ahead. The internet, that is called Internet 3.0, Internet 1.0, were PCs, and on-site internet, one-directional. We read websites. Internet 2.0 is a mobile internet, the one in iPhones, applications, Facebook, and 3.0 internet that allows you to immerse. I don't know whether this word can be transplanted into Polish, but let's put it in the English form. It boils down to the fact that we will be in the world we want to be in. When starting discussions on metaverse, I use a comparison or a metaphor. You watch a football match, I love very much, I watch it often. You watch it on television. The idea is as follows. In the future, you put goggles or Google-like thing on, and you can be in the stadium with your nearest and dearest and colleagues and watch it as if you were watching this one. How do we see it is the question, and the answer is we should all be humble with this perception. Hardly do we know which direction it develops. This is yet another buzzword. We are convinced that we are going this direction. AR and VR that we have today is not the metaverse that we are trying to attain. What parts of our life will be most impacted by metaverse is to be discussed. We're going to discuss it. What are the actors? It is an open question, not to mention regulation and so on and so forth. This regulatory theme will appear too. What can we use? This prospective reality. I scribbled down You can recruit people better. You can cure fears, distortions. Future, those who are connected online may also answer this question. How about you? A few years ago, when I was taking part in similar conferences, when social platforms were discussed and the Internet 2.0, I was always into saying that this is not digitization becoming a separate business sector that should be omnipresent, that is digitization. And it's similar here. When we start talking about metaverse, VR, ER, it was lots about gaming. Gaming will be a part of this puzzle, but a small one. But metaverse, VR, and where VR evolves, how it changes our reality. There are many examples. A few weeks ago, I had a chance of meeting a Canadian surgeon who teaches at Vancouver University. And they have developed such software that make it possible for future surgeons to put goggles on and to train on false hearts and false knees. Something rather impossible without these goggles. I'm speaking about it on a funny note, but it's a huge revolution for future surgeons. Another example, a distant one, but we've been working together with a local company, education. We entered a partnership with a Polish company, one of the greatest CE VR studios, VR Heroes. They create VR movies, history focused movies. And the most famous one is a postcard from uprising times. You put goggles on, you watch a film, you are in Warsaw 1939. 44, sorry, 44. Imagine what a change it is, what a potential change it is when children learn history, book reading about Uprising 44 might be interesting, and you put goggles on and you've got the feeling that you are there, your senses. It's what you feel, more of business or entertainment? Question to our guests. I'd like to ask about something. If children are to take part in uprising in immersive way, I'm scared. I hope this is taken care of by psychologists, and I hope that this is not appropriation of narrative by one party that will expand these, invest public money, so that the children teach in a different way, immersive teaching of experiences rather than knowledge. I'll tell you that this is one of the reasons why Metaverse is an alarming technology for me. I believed myself to be an enthusiast of new technologies. I'm working on artificial intelligence solutions. I can see the good things and difficult problems. Then the problems using Metaverse. I've got some questions. The first question is, are we really technologically ready? I agree with Jakub. We should be careful because now we put goggles on and we attack only one of the senses. It seems to be alarming. It seems to be a burden in order to create simulations of the reality we are in. It's not enough. We would have to have a panel, something that makes it possible for people to operate in this reality. Because if you overstimulate one sense, well, I don't know how it would work if we want to stay there longer. Physiologically, we are not ready. But putting children into the reality of the uprising, well, it sends shivers down my spine. Another element in the context of this world we can see about NFTs, currencies, and the fact that we'll be selling our intimate data for the currencies. Will there be two parallel circulations? Will sell data and enter free and cyber ones? This is top-down designed world. So it's good to know whether there's going to be a few words or other participation forms, one world, cyber currency, as it was the second life, or you have the currency or not. So two or three question marks. Before we say about good things that are associated with the technology, let's talk about the wholeness of the world. What's the perception of Meta and other entities? Microsoft sees it as the Internet of Things, but Metaverse has got it in consumer applications. So, a few questions, including the ones regarding children in the uprising. Jakub, before that, Michał Boni. Thank you very much for inviting me. Sorry for the fact that I'm not physically present. I agree with what Jakub said. This is a second chance and great uncertainty because we don't know how that is going to be. And what Ola said about different threats, the problematic word, immersive, that one that drags you in. There are different psychological dangers because it can create addiction, it can create overstimulation situation, attacking one of the senses, and third of all, you can imagine that situation between man being the subject and the avatar being the subject of a virtual world. There is the problem of double subjectivity with unclear identity. If we are cyber security, one of the greatest threats, cyber jacking, crypto jacking. So calculative power is launched so that we use somebody else's data to play and win cryptocurrencies. We need to have super securities so that the economy of Metaverse is not entered by these threats in this very simple way. I'm not speaking about, well, I agree with Kuba, history teaching. We can discuss about this postcard from the uprising. In teaching history, it might be a good situation, but we can imagine a situation where Metaverse generates or relaunches Bin Laden. This is the argument that is used very often. And in the Metaverse world, we've got one of the main terrorists who lives in the world that you find it difficult to see where is the borderline between reality and imagination. Having noticed obvious benefits like medicine, fake operations and training, and many domains, as Taranti, well, they use it in different illnesses, mental and physical, to train to give stimuli to your brain so that it learns. If these are more effective, if they help man, then more than any other exercise. So the main problem is that we need to pose a set of questions that are philosophical, ethical, so that we realize where, in addition to great chances of metaverse, there are threats we haven't noticed because they are not noticeable. The negative consequences might have been seen. We might discuss it later, how to cope with it, how to cope it regulatory-wise, awareness-wise. Jakub Turowski, I agree with Ola. There are many threats and challenges, and therefore it is worth talking. It seems that we are in a better position compared to what was happening with the Internet 2.0 when we talk about it, how it is supposed to look like, who is supposed to be a regulator and decisive when we don't have the tools. Internet 2.0 and social media, it was like that. Something great was created, and we realized that, oh gosh, you might need to regulate it this or that way. In ideal world, some corporate decisions should be made in a more democratic way. There is an asset. This discussion happens before this thing becomes big. All the questions are excellent, right to the point. Therefore, I think that meetings like these and other fora on that metaverse are very important. It is important.
As the creation and how can it be used in a specific ways? Well, of course, yes. Well, you must say that handbooks in the form of a material book can be biased. It is not that whatever is in digital is per se worse from what is in the real world. But the question is, if I may interfere, how far education, not just history teaching, but giving students the capability to enter the physical experiment, chemical experiment, observe it from a different perspective, how far they would better understand the process than compared to the traditional way of teaching. Similarly, human anatomy. The question is, are these works pending in this direction? We may say that several years ago, when I was in the US at Meta, I heard that the educational future was to be programmed considering different regulations. And a question to Jakub, when you say regulations, what do you actually mean? The agenda goes smoothly. I don't know what I mean. I mean that different milieus, the point is that different milieus could talk and in a democratic way decide how the metaverse should look, what the world should be in it. And it's not that I care for hard regulations. We do know how far they can be behind the digital, but creating some rules, joint values. We here think of the internet of the future. Is it going to be our Western internet or Russian Chinese? But it's another topic. So I don't know in response to your questions. Perhaps we shouldn't go to very hard regulations. They frequently fail in the digital world, though they might be needed. Finally, so I understand that we focus on the environment regarding the rules so that we do not exaggerate. We need to form regulations special for the metaverse, review what we have, and think about rules and effects they may give so that the metaverse is human, ethical. A short remark. If the audience have any questions, feel free during the debate. I'm still wondering over one thing. We are observing the metaverse from quite a height. considering its view from a philosophical perspective, what about if the technology is first broadly used by companies not like Meta or Microsoft, but industry like Siemens, Bosch, BMW, whatever? I mean, a situation where it is far easier to build and control a digital twin, that is the digital reproduction of equipment we are producing. And for instance, Siemens will launch a factory. They will not need 3 months for a startup to train the staff. They could be they will be able to launch on the second day full scale. Why am I talking? True benefits are seen here. You can find a true business model that could be easily implemented. Perhaps this is the future for Metaverse. Can I take the floor, please? Well, I believe that it is interesting what you are saying, Karol, because we ask the question what it is, how we define it, potential use. We spoke about regulating the space, or at least it's good it is being debated before the technology is in full development. I must say that the project is pending, but I'm asking a question, why would we need it at all? I frequently think, even in the context of AI, why would we need it? There are several answers: optimizations, predictions, savings, medical use, other spaces. On the other hand, you can say this is a technology that imitates human thinking. We wanted to understand ourselves. If we translate the questions into metaverse, you can say, as you said, digital twin, a very nice concept, this industrial metaverse with its small predictions for equipment, simulating the behavior of a factory line, potential medical uses, plenty of various benefits. But in the consumer aspect, I keep saying why, what for? I can imagine it is a form of an e-drug, extending perception, building a non-existent reality without floors, ceilings, in another form to stimulate our brain, a kind of entertainment. It can be a space for artistic practice. The drug is metaphoric, something that enhances perception. And we can see some grounds for that. Instead of taking drugs, you put on your Googles, though Google is just one sense. I'd like us to move in that world rather than sit in a hotel wearing Googles that make you sweat, which is not natural condition. But you can see grounds. Other interesting things are attempts to experience others, empathizing, sending nonverbal messages. I can imagine synesthetic experience. That's again expanding perception. But when I see that the use involves me sitting in an office, but the office has a wallpaper with running sharks, and I can become an infantile avatar of myself, I'm wondering why. Why would I work in that space instead of working in my original space? When I think of everyday activities which Second Life tried to copy and they failed, Kuba, you came, your proposal was simpler than Second Life, where you had to build your avatar, build real properties, meet people, spend money. And here, all of a sudden, you've got an exemplary model of communication, simple, effective, that is social media, Facebook included, and metaverse in the form of a Second Life vanished. So how we think about it, it's an open question. The perception expansion can be the ground. People want to experiment, they want to progress with personal experience, thinking different things, research of different nature. I can see it here. But copying the existing reality is a curious question. Do we really need it? Do we need immersion for that, or perhaps simple enhancement of the reality? It is enough if we stay in a classroom in school to use the smartphone to see some things. Do we want to be so much stimulated and run for this escapism? Is it to be a direction, an experience, or something we exist within? For me, that is an interesting question. I love debates when the participants ask questions. You can make it more complicated if you imagine a metaverse working environment. All of this sudden, you may see it is metaverse, but it will replicate all threats present in human communities. So the speech, hate speech, or the disinformation scale using with overstimulated tools of the metaverse, if it poses a threat. Extra question from me. We would benefit from another participant. The, there are plenty of challenges. There will be many challenges. They will obviously be exaggerated compared to those of social media and the contemporary world. But Ola, you are right. It is not that the metaverse should be used everywhere for every purpose, and it should be the response to all the deficits of our world. Just like with the internet, just like with the other media, it could be a positive use or negative for the society. And it's up to us. And I mean here the whole ecosystem of people who somehow deal with digital solutions, major companies like mine, small startups, the academia, the political world, to build something that would be positive for the society and useful. I fully consent that there are plenty of potential solutions that can be arranged technically, which either will be senseless or negative for people, and you need to be very cautious. So, how should we talk about this potential regulation of something we name metaverse if we do not know how it is going to operate? I'm not being negative. We don't know who's going to use it. We don't know what would be possible with that. We don't know if we need it. How to regulate something we know so little about and talk so much about. Indeed, the word regulations may be premature. What matters is that we discuss it today, that we somehow try to understand what it's all about. What are the possible threats? What are the possible challenges? And only the next step would be possible regulations or frameworks. A list of such threats could be drawn up even today. We heard it today. Can I speak? A list of threats could be drawn up today when we speak of threats related to its immersive nature. then different activities that limit the sphere of psychological dependence and overstimulating individual senses can be made. If we say that social threats could be replicated, the threats of current internet, disinformation, hate speech, there are tools to moderate the content. They are regulated by law. I don't know if they should be technically the same. They need to be probably different for the metaverse, but finally something we know that multi-layerness and multi-direction of data flow for metaverse to operate forces new methods to operationalize data protection compared to what we have in the GDPR. The role of data controller changes, data input authority changes, the data will cross because the essence of metaverse is that we use one identity. I'm talking about the avatar, but it exists in different devices, and the data flow, the control, the creating good conditions for data protection when the data is constantly shared and divided, finally something that seems to be important. If data protection contracts include our consent and the management of such consents that in the metaverse would require several individual consents. By the way, shouldn't we simplify it so what one consent will do to simplify the data consent management way? Finally, cybersecurity question. How difficult or how easy would it be to steal avatar's identity? Is it safe? Uh, will the current regulations, laws, certificates, cyber resilience regulations, there is discussion pending on data regulation. In my opinion, when we ask what regulations we should add to the current debate in the EU, this metaverse dimension, and ask the question, well, not that we need a new regulation focused on metaverse only, but what can we add to the existing regulations? We often say that companies that build their metaverse power, they acquire other companies. There are people in the EU Parliament. We should make amendments to the regulations that to competition law. However, the conclusion is I'm not saying about ownership, intellectual property ownership. The conclusion is we need to speak about the rules and regulations, opportunities and threats, so that we can add new legislation concepts into the existing laws and verify how much they are needed.
I'd like to add something to that because we've got technology context, AI, and AI Act that is being proceeded as a part of regulation that comes into force next year. It will apply to metaverse too, because we've got the obligation of transparency. There is a ban on deepfake. It is not creating characters, but they need to be clearly marked. Voice bots and similar. Virtual assistants. We need to have full transparency, knowing who we are dealing with. Is it video of a real person or AI created. We meet a virtual assistant, and there is transparency, so it's like marking bots in the game to greater scale. I can see this technological system makes ends meet, so I imagine that there is artificial intelligence. So Metaverse will be a great world, choosing where we go, what we buy. It will be managed by algorithms. Like there are social media with lots of AI. This is why the regulations that is entering, we don't know everything about it yet, will be there next year. And different models will shape the recommendations. It will be the guide in the metaverse world. What to see. It's interesting. It would be nice to work on what we have, one thing, and to learn from technological companies how they see how they see the economy of the world, what they assume. The second life. This is quite an idealistic world. Much was given to the users, the inventory. You couldn't create everything that you wanted. You had to compete for specific resources. You couldn't put the house in the place somebody was in, but there was grassroots, open source movement. It changed, it commercialized, and you remember it was quite a scary world. There was a dark space and very little of participatory space. And if we want to start this discussion in a serious note, the players who've got the tool to create the world are the most important, so that they can say that this is user generated, or is this economy of various types, or is it a duplication of Facebook version in a new unveiling, something that we know. One more thing to what she said. Be brave, make the best of it. There is discussion whether Metaverse brings an open and decentralized model. Technically, there are such chances, which means that there was a huge discussion about open source. We'll be speaking about open metaverse in different dimensions. In a sense, with the possibility of human participation and control over your own data that is in this world. It's a further horizon, but not so distant. Before Jakub Turowski, we've got a question from the room. If you could introduce yourself. It's working. Excellent. Jakub Jasiukiewicz, Film School in Łódź. Michał and Ola have answered half of my question, but I'd like to have a postulate. It's not too early to create regulations for metaverse. This is the right time. Different forms of metaverses. Facebook kind of appropriated the name. It's like Adidas, that all sporty shoes are called Adidas. We are speaking about a broader one than just Zuckerberg's corporation's product. You should say that we should regulate it because you are in this panel, know the thesis related to capitalism and watchdogs. We've given so much from our privacy about our relations, societies, our bodies. This is the currency that we buy services for in the network. It's free, but we give back lots of information. in return. Hardly do we realize how broad it is, what kind of patterns are created to create maps. Not maps of me, Jakub, or Wojtek, but Facebook can foresee my illness in 2 or 3 years' time with so much data they have. I've been in this portal for so many years, and on the basis of what I write in and thousands of people who are like me, there are patterns that can foresee our behavior. So, when we immerse ourselves without knowing where we enter, if we immerse in the immersion, and this is multi-sensory elements that connects all our biometric data, this will be far-reaching invigilation, will be truly hacked. I don't know whether it's worth selling our privacy in total and all the information about us and society for a social entertaining services. Thank you very much. There are lots of points. Let's take it step by step. Full consent. Metaverse is not meta, and vice versa. The internet of the future will be a success when it is based on collaboration of a huge ecosystem. And we are, or we are not a part of it. Nobody's going to say that Meta will be one of the bodies that will eat a part of the new cake. There were many bodies that kind of found a bearing in the old world, but not in the new. Kodak is a good example. Metaverse and Internet of the future, we hope that will be a part of it, but there must be many more entities. So answering Ola's question, ask big players this question. I'm not convinced whether the big players should direct this conversation about metaverse. And second of all, we may not know which direction it is developing. We have some assumptions. We announced collaboration with Microsoft a few days ago. With regards metaverse, it is both work and gaming. So this is the space where you can see the potential. A few days ago, we announced creation of Quest Pro new goggles, returning to heavy-duty industry. They will offer solutions, but we do not have a business model that has been specified that clearly tells you what kind of income will be generated in the future. This is an open question. Speaking about data, in my opinion, what is interesting that indeed Internet 2.0 and social media and the business model was rooted in the fact that we, the users, have access to very interesting tool free of charge, and you pay the price of your data and targeted advertisements. I don't know whether metaverse model must be based on the data. There might be fiduciary ways of entering the world. So believing that business models and the data will be equally used, in my opinion, we don't have the answer to this question yet. Speaking about regulations, they'll be needed, but we need to be careful not to do copy paste from previous models. Try to regulate on the basis of what will come, what we don't know yet. When we started this conversation on social media, there were lots of specialists believing that it's enough to regulate this like a telecom market and that's okay. Whilst these are two separate worlds, two separate markets, separate investment paths. Therefore, we should talk about principles, as Michał was speaking, and if we discuss regulations in Brussels, Metaverse should be there in the back of the head. But principles, let's not create regulations, and today's conversation shows it. We don't know what we are actually speaking about. Sorry, I'm a bit worried that Kuba says that we don't know what we are speaking about. If Kuba doesn't know that, who is supposed to know? This is not the world that is being born. There'll be different things that surprise us, human invention and different ideas, but I understand that the world is being created on some kind of cornerstones. It is not the world we are born in, but designed world. So it seems to me, well, it's nice. We have invitation to discussion and discussion about participation. I'd like to understand what kind of invitation that is. Fora like this, do we create it through questions and doubts, or is this uh, so that nobody knows anything, and we can create a monster? And I understand your provisions, Kuba. Let's not create seatbelts before we have a car in place. We cannot have a tough regulation because we may not have benefits that you mentioned. And there are benefits. If representatives of big companies that build this world technology wise, they say we don't know. So what's the proportion of what your expectations of what happens in the side of the users? And how much we do the thing we know nothing about? Isn't that the history of innovations that we start with doing rather than knowing what we do? Any innovation is associated with a risk where hardly we know where we go, first of all. And second of all, this is the internet of the future. I disagree with the suggestion that Meta and Microsoft are to be the ones to orchestrate the discussions on metaverse regulations. We should be a part of it. For God's sake, we live in democracy, and other bodies should have their say, should have a decising role. There was no intention of this kind among those who speak here that you are the ones to orchestrate the regulation work or principles. It's good that we are discussing things, but it would be easier to discuss it if there was a perspective of development alongside with the business models. When I look at different works happening here in the European Parliament, the resolution a few months ago which said, with regards to the question, will we have to have new attitude towards the data thing? I said no new law on data protection is needed. We need to think about new operationalization ways, which is practical supervision over data and creation of our awareness. But when you were answering Jakub's question, you said that in this world of Facebook society and everything that was so important over 10 or 12 years, data was very important in business model creation. It may not be here, but I agree with what was in the question. In Metaverse, all I was speaking about it. Transparency, AI, with Metaverse, the data, voice, emotions, image, sensitive data of all kinds, well, is important because there is a transfer between human and avatar in their subjectivity, and many elements that are sensitive are transferred there. The human subjectivity protection is clearly defined. Human traits protection present in avatar requires new operationalization, and this is worth discussing. And at the end, I'd like to ask one more question. Have we thought, thinking about the future of Metaverse, what kind of technical conditions that is going to be possible in? What kind of networks or complex models? Like it is in Poland, where we pretend to have 5G, there is no 5G with a surplus, or don't we need 5G for true metaverse? Because when you think about metaverse accessibility, inclusion of metaverse, if there is here, everybody can use it, socially important. Are there technical conditions for that? We'll try to answer. Did I see you raising your hand? I was wondering, Elita Pietrek, Łódź University of Technology. I was wondering, isn't that so? You are looking for justification of existence of a project that skips our awareness. There is some kind of economic project, and we try to find concrete senses. We would like to give that to because humans need sense to the reality they live in. I've got the feeling during this discussion. Jakub Turowski giving his answers, and we'll have to wrap up because just a few minutes to go. I'll be speaking more about today's possibilities, allowing us to use digital solutions in different domains, broadly defined, internet, broadly defined, in a different way from the way that is based on image and reading and listening. Because this is what it all boils down to. So now the question that needs answering: what kind of domains do we want to use it and how we want to use it? Thus, the principles that are so important that Michał was referring to. We've got 3 minutes, 1 minute for each speaker. So, what is the home take message for participants of the discussion? Who is the one to start? Who goes first? I would suggest considering the question, what is it for? Are we going towards metaverse? Is this a vision that we want to give people experiences and it makes sense? Or, frankly speaking, I might be accused of supporting markets. Like Pokemon Go creator said, he'd prefer to have augmented reality, a world with some kind of on-top solution rather than full immersion with all psychological, economic conditions. I am at the crossroad, so I'm not convinced about metaverse. It might be because I am reserved, I'm not Z generation, and nobody has given me the vision that I'd like to live the world in. Michał Boni? Briefly, there are also question marks, but my intuition tells me that this is the direction that may trigger radical change in operation of different digital tools. And I'm asking myself a question, is that going to be World 3.0? No 100% certainty, but my intuition tells me I would avoid the mistake that different technological innovations have had. We discussed principles, rules, and regulations too late. It's not about tough laws that would block innovation, but rules and agreement that the biggest players should observe it. And the lesson learned is AI debate, ethical, transparency rules, accountability, not harming people in a mental psychological sense, and non-infringements of their subjectivity. If we stick to this, the test will be evaluated by the reality. Jakub Turowski, we are in the phase of posing questions whether this will prove the test of time or not. We are at the beginning of this journey of Metaverse. As I was saying, in my opinion, it's natural evolution of internet communication that is possible because technology allows for it. And I fully agree with Michał. We are at the beginning of the road. Let's talk about principles now, not in 10 years' time. We finish. I promised the producers will finish on time. We exceeded, but it's better to leave you with more hunger than to say everything.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise
Atlas Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the US. We have about 159 partners in the United States right now, and the bulk of our partners are outside, nearly 500 in total.
Atlas Network, it connects people from all over the world, defending the idea of human dignity, defending human rights and personal liberties.
Atlas Network is focusing on, I think, the most important and moral cause in the entire world.
We partner with local innovators, local leaders who understand conditions on the ground in communities facing real challenges. We look at the people from the worldwide freedom movement that are passionate, are ready to make a difference, understand local conditions, and we invest in them.
At Atlas Network, we unleash individual ingenuity to enrich humanity.
The United States does not have a lock on the idea of freedom and liberty. Those ideas are beyond borders.
One of the main goals of Atlas Network is to eradicate poverty around the world, and we do that by investing millions of dollars in our partners' work every year.
Historically, wealthy nations around the world have tried to help low-income countries develop. The way we've been doing it traditionally has not really been working. So there's a movement to do development differently, and that means we need to step back as outsiders and rethink the role that we're playing in helping people in low-income countries achieve their dreams.
We want to make the world a better place. We want to make the world a freer world.
All of us want to leave a legacy and be part of something big to make a better world. This is exactly the work of Atlas Network.
With our growing number of hundreds of successful partners, we're stronger than ever.
Changing the world
Changing the world
Changing the world
starts together
with us.